I studied music in college, and the first day of one of my theory classes, I had a professor who was going through the roll, calling everybody out. And he got to my name, which is usually at the top of the list, and he said, "Adam Booth." He said, "Do you know the world's shortest poem?" And I said, "No." And he said, "It goes like this: fleas, Adam had 'em." And that was the first day of class. Talk about welcoming one into the theory world. Maybe right there would be good. Thank you. Well, as you might know, I just came out of the bathroom. And I'm from West Virginia. I'm from the Appalachian Mountains, the Central Appalachian Mountains. I thought I'd start with open the concert with a story from West Virginia. There's a county in West Virginia called Pendleton County. It is the most central of the Central Appalachians in West Virginia. And it's different than all the other counties around because the terrain just rises right up out of the ground. It's almost as if when it was created, the sky just reached right down, grabbed onto the earth and pulled it right back up. The mountains are so steep that they cast shadows in every direction. And in those shadows, there are questions. Now, there was a family that lived there by the name of Poffenbarger, and they were three. There was mother and two young boys, about 6, about 8. And the three of them lived alone there because Father Poffenbarger had died the year before. Their home was a log cabin set up on the mountainside. Now, there's not a lot of land around there that's flat because of the way that the sky pulled the earth up toward it. If you were to go out the back of their cabin, there was a plot of land that they could manage to till up and plant so they could have enough vegetables and crops to make it through the year. And that's where Mother spent most of her days when the weather was good. If you came out the front, there was a yard that was fenced in. The kind of fence that was such that there were 2 wooden beams that went into a post, and then 2 beams into a post. It was a fence that Dad had built the year before, well, several years back before he died. And this is where they kept their cow. And this time of year, it's where the milking lesson was happening. See, the older Poffenbarger boy was teaching the younger one how to milk the cow because he had the duties as the man of the house to tend to at 8 years old. There they were that day. The older one was dragging a stool out and a metal pail, and when they got out to the cow, the younger one was just walking right behind, wide-eyed. And the older brother kept telling the younger one, "Now watch, you always got to milk a cow from a stool. You don't never milk a cow standing up." This was the first day of the milking lesson. He sat down there and he said, "You got to watch me do this 5 days before you can try it out." He set the pail right there. He said, "Now watch. You take your fingers and wrap it right around like this, and when you pull," and he pulled, and a stream of milk shot right out of the udder. "Look what happens." The younger brother's eyes got even bigger. "Wow. Can I try?" "No. You got to wait 5 days and watch me doing it before you get to try. You can do it with any one of them. It works here," and he pulled and milk came out, and this one here and pulled and milk came out. And as he was showing his brother how to milk that cow, a voice came from just on the other side of her, just outside of that fence. "Hello? Excuse me, boys?" The older brother stood up off of that stool and he walked around the front side of that cow. And when he looked there on the other side of the fence, beauty. The most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. He'd never seen a woman that looked like this. Her skin so rich and dark, like a chinkapin nut. Hair just as dark that came down around her shoulder, and eyes like coals. She looked at that little boy and she said, "Excuse me, I've been walking through these hills for some time, and I'm ever so thirsty. Won't you go inside and get me a glass of water so I can wet my throat a little bit?" And even though he was only 8, something woke up inside of him that day. She asked again, "Won't you go inside and get me a glass of water?" And he looked up at that woman and said, "Uh-huh." And he took off running toward the house like a little boy can run. And as he was running like that, he turned around and said to his younger brother, "Don't you touch that cow." He made it inside. He opened the cupboard and pulled out a glass, and he was filling it with water. And as he turned around, he was shaken so much from running and from the sight of that beauty that he dropped that glass. It shattered into pieces right there on the floor, water all over the place. And the back window was open, and the sound of that shattering managed to go out that back window. His mother stood up. "What are you doing?" She set down her hoe and she made her way directly in. When she came in, she said, "What are you doing in here? Why'd you drop that glass like that?" And he said, "Mama, I was just getting a glass of water for that woman out there." "What woman?" "The real pretty one out there." "Take me to her right now." He let her out. When they got back there, the younger brother was just sitting on that stool, kicking his legs back and forth. "I didn't touch it." "Where is she?" "She was right there, right on the other side of the fence." And when Mother looked around, there was nothing down that dirt road, nothing up. But she could have sworn that she saw disappearing into the shadows of the trees deeper in the holler was the flicking tail of a black cat. And it was that night at dinner that Mother addressed the boys. "Now, boys," she said, "listen, if some woman comes around here that you've never seen before, don't you give her nothing. No matter what she looks like or what story she tells you, don't let no strange woman get nothing off of our property." "But Mama, what if she's real thirsty and needs some water?" "You mind your mother." "Yes, ma'am." And they ate in mostly silence for the rest of the meal. It was day 2 of the milking lesson. Stool down, pail. You got to sit on the stool. Never milk a cow standing up. Watch. You put your fingers around like this, and when you pull, the milk comes out. "I know. I saw you do it yesterday." "Can I try?" "No, 5 full days before you get to try. It works with any one of them." He was having a good time taunting his little brother, when from behind the cow came that voice. "Hello, boys. Hello." They recognized that voice. The older Poffenberger boy, he stood up and he walked around. But the woman that the voice came out of on the other side of their fence did not match the same woman that was there the day before. And that woman that he had met the day before, he thought was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen in his life. But that changed this day. She stood there with skin the color of cream and hair like copper and eyes as green as the grass in springtime. She looked right down into that little boy's face and said, "You don't know me. I'm visiting my granny who lives on the other side of this mountain here. We've been baking today and we ran right out of flour. I was wondering, don't you have about a cup of flour you could lend to me? Just run inside and get some." And he remembered what his mama had said to him. So he looked that beautiful woman right in the eyes and said, "No. Maybe you don't have a whole cup. We don't need that much. Just about a half a cup of flour would be good. Run inside and get me some." He said, "No, ma'am. We don't need that much. Really just a pinch will do. Won't you run inside and get me a pinch of flour? Run inside and get it and come back and put it right here in my hand." And he swallowed hard and deep and said, "No, ma'am. I can't help you." And she'd been denied 3 times. She spun on her heel like she had no control of it, and it looked like she just floated right off into the hills, into the trees, and was gone. And that night, the boys told their mother what had happened, and she said, "You done real good, boys, but she'll be back." And it was the third day of the milking lesson. The sun was out. It was the warmest day of the week. And that cow was happy as could be. Lowing there in the wind. Her tail was just flipping back and forth. And when the boys got out there, they noticed that it had flicked right into that place where the beam went into the post of the fence. And the hairs on the end of it got stuck. And the older brother, he grabbed that tail and he tried to pull that cow's tail free, but the more he pulled and worked with it, the more those hairs got stuck in that place. I'm going to run inside and get a shear to cut those hairs off of her tail. Don't you touch that cow. And as soon as the older brother was gone, hello? Excuse me, little boy? From the other side of the cow, the younger brother walked around and saw there was coming a voice from a woman that was hideous, ugly as could be. Her hair was all big, wild-like, and she was groaning. Oh, little boy, she said, I've been sleeping out in these woods for days. Look at my hair. And she turned around, and the back of her big, bushy hair had sticks and leaves sticking out. And as he watched those leaves, they dried up and crumbled right in front of his face, and the twigs broke. Oh, she turned back around. Oh, she said, don't you have a comb inside you could get to help an old woman like me? And that little boy looked up and said, yes, Mama's got a comb made out of a bone right in the drawer in there. Oh, she said, run inside and get it so I can comb my hair. And he said, okay. And he took off running. And as soon as he disappeared, that woman noticed the cow was in pain, and she looked down and saw that just that much of the cow's tail hair was sticking off of their property. And she took it with her. Here's that comb you wanted. He came running back out, and she was gone. And then the older brother came out with a shear. What are you doing out with that comb? I was going to give it to that woman. What woman? Did you give her anything? No. All right. He freed the cow's tail, sat down and went to milk the cow, but when he wrapped his fingers around the udder and pulled, no. He tried this udder and pulled. Both of the boys gasped because it was not milk that came out of the udder, it was blood. And we pulled this one, blood, and this one, blood. Mama, they called, Mama, something's wrong with the cow. And the mom threw her hoe handle down and came running. When she got there, she said, get out of the way. And she sat down and began milking that cow, and it was just blood, blood, blood. And she turned and said, what did you give her? Nothing. We didn't give nobody nothing. She said, well, she done blinked our cow. One of y'all gave her something. She got something off our property. No, Mama, we promise. Well, this is how we fix it. And they watched as she milked and milked until the blood just filled that pail. She took that pail inside, poured half of it into a large pot, set it to boil, and when it got to boiling, she opened up her drawer and pulled out a 50-cent piece, bit it, a taste of silver, and read those words, in God we trust. And she took that coin and flicked it down into the pot of boiling blood. And as that silver went down into the depths of the pot, the blood gasped and ran up the side of the pot and leapt out of the pot. Even though it had been boiling, it touched everything in there, including their skin, and it did not burn them. She poured the rest of it into the pot, let it come to a boil, then she picked it up and took it outside. She dug her a hole out in the front yard and began to pour that blood down into the hole and said to the older boy, you run and get me a Willer switch. He ran and got a Willer switch and brought it back, and she took it and she bent it double, and she began to whip that bloody milk as she poured it down into the ground. And the boy saw that she was speaking some words under her breath, and she whipped it 11, 12, 13 times. Now, she said, that should fix the cow. But you mind me, sometime in the next 9 days, might be 3, might be 6, that woman's going to come back, and you'll know who it was that put the spell on our cow. You'll be able to tell who that witch was. And wouldn't you know, 3 days later, the younger brother was sitting on the stool. It was his first turn. And he pulled, and good milk came out. He tried this one. The older brother said, see, I told you it worked. And from down the road, they heard this sound that caught their attention. Oh, oh, and they looked, and coming up that dirt road on the outside of their fence, oh, was an old woman. Oh, and she was walking backwards. Oh, and bent over double. Oh, oh. And when she got to where the boys were, she turned and she said, boys, help me, look. And she pulled up the left side of her skirt, and her leg was all burned up, like a boiling liquid had been poured all over it. Oh, she said, run inside and get me some medicine, please, please. And the older brother looked at her and said, no. Oh, she dropped the side of her skirt. She said, but look at this. And she lifted up this side of her skirt and all the way down her leg. Welt marks, like she'd been whipped. 13 of them. Please, she said, run inside and get me a balm for my legs, please. And that boy stood there like this, and he said, no. Oh, she dropped that side of her skirt. She said, but look at my feet. And she lifted up the hem of her skirt, and they looked at her feet, and the skin just burned up right in front of their eyes, and it flaked off and blew away down the road right there as they watched. Oh, she said, won't you please just go inside and get me a salve for my feet? Help an old woman out. And that older boy, he wanted to help her, but he looked her right in the face and said, no, can't help you. When she had been denied 3 times, she looked him right in the eyes and said, you mean to tell me you won't help an old woman? And he said, no. Her scream filled the holler, and it echoed back and forth. And she was gone. In her place, a black cat that took off running as fast as it could into the woods. And from that day forward, no witch woman ever bothered the Poffenberger family again there in Pendleton County, West Virginia. Thanks.